Greetings, it's me, Chantal. Good to see you. So many of you might not know, but I have a deep love for the stories that the stars tell. And although I don't have any training, I do have experience and a passion and a curiosity. And I have sat many nights under the stars just trying to understand the rhythms and the patterns of how they work. And the more you go into it, the deeper the dance goes, and it's just infinite. I've learned a lot from or through asking questions and either receiving them via research or just actually sitting underneath the stars and listening, feeling what the mythologies and symbologies that has been carried down mean and how they can transform. So there's something very, very spectacular going to be happening in our sky from Earth's perspective on Sunday, the 24th, 2019, this upcoming Sunday. And this is the conjunction of Venus and Jupiter on the galactic center. So what does this mean? What does all of this mean? What are the symbologies involved? The galactic center, although we might not see it with our eyes looking up to the sky, we know that the galactic center is placed or finds its home at about 27 degrees Sagittarius. And the galactic center is the portal of life and death for our galaxy. Now, Venus, she is the goddess of love. She is the sacred feminine, and throughout most cultures, if not all, she is seen as the sacred feminine figure. Venus can either be a morning or an evening star, and this represents the two qualities, that the duality. It can either be mostly it represents the White River woman, the goddess of light, and then like Inanna, and then you have on the opposite side of the spectrum, the evening star is represents Ereshkigal, or the darker goddess. And I believe in Xhosa traditions. Um, and if she's a morning star, she's feminine, and if she's a evening star, she's masculine. So it's just these dualities, but in general, Venus, Inanna, Magdalene, Aphrodite, Ishkakau, the star is represented by the goddess of love. And then Jupiter, for me personally, and in some researches that I've done in order to find if my musings relates to anybody else, represents the sacred masculine. So you might ask, what about Mars? Well, yes, Mars does represent a masculinity, yet it represents the patriarchal masculine, while Jupiter represents the crystalline, sacred masculine. If you look at, if you look from our perspective up into the sky, and you look at Venus and you look at Jupiter, they are the brightest stars, the brightest planets that we can see. And they mirror each other so beautifully. They look exactly the same depending on how far they are from the Earth. But mostly they have the same form, while Mars carries like this redness to him and is not the same size really as Venus. So for me, he doesn't fit into the ideal healthiest partnership with Venus, while Jupiter does. The two of them together just create like this beautiful magic. And so on Sunday, these two, the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, will be meeting for the first time in a very, very long time. on the galactic center. Every year they do meet and they do conjunct together, as far as I know. But meeting on the galactic center, this is not something that happens every day, every year. I don't know how often this happens. I want to say once every 26,000 years, but I'm unsure of that. It is a very special event. And I'm sure many of you have been feeling this in, I see it, I feel it. This rebirth of relationship and what it means in this day and age. And I'm not going to dive too deeply into that, because that is for you to explore what has been happening for yourself, as the story of relationship. And I mean romantic relationship, specifically masculine and feminine relationship, the marriage of man and woman, masculine and feminine. And this whole story is being rebirthed into something spectacular. Yet as this transformation occurs, it's not easy to shed the skin. It's not easy to be inside of the cocoon. And this is what we're currently shaking off. We're currently shedding the skin. We're currently morphing out of the cocoon. And it's very uncomfortable. It really is. So I have a story to share that I feel just so resonant with this time. And I'm going to put the phone down and I'm going to read it. It comes from Woman Who Runs with the Wolves, and it's chapter 5. The story is called Skeleton Woman. And I'm just going to put the phone down and start reading. Hunting. When the heart is a lonely hunter. Chapter 5 of Woman Who Runs with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Skeleton woman, facing the life nature of love. Wolves are good at relationships. Anyone who has observed wolves see how deeply they bond. Mates are most often for life. Even though they clash, even though there is dissension, their bonds carry them over and through harsh winters, plentiful springs, long walks, new offspring, all predators, tribal dances, and group sings. The relational needs of humans are not so different. While the instinctual lives of wolves include loyalty and lifelong bonds of trust and devotion, humans sometimes have troubles with these matters. If we were to use archetypal terms to describe what determines the strong bond among wolves, we might summarize that the integrity of their relationship is derived from their synchronization with the ancient pattern of all nature, what I call the life-death-life cycle. The life-death-life nature is the cycle of animation, development, decline, and death, and that is always followed by reanimation. The cycle affects all physical life and all facets of psychological life. Everything, the sun, novas, and the moon, as well as the affairs of humans and those of the tiniest creatures, cells and atoms alike, have this fluttering, then faltering, then fluttering again. Unlike humans, wolves do not deem the ups and downs of life, energy, power, food, nor opportunity as startling or punitive. The peaks and valleys just are, and wolves ride them as efficiently, as fluidly as possible. The instinctual nature has the miraculous ability to live through all positive boon, all negative consequence, and still maintain relationship to self and to others. Among wolves, the cycles of nature and fate are met with the grace and wit and the endurance to stay tight with one's mate and to live long and as well as can be. But in order for humans to live and give loyalty in the most fit manner, in this way which is most wise, most preserving, and most feeling, one has to go up against the very thing one fears most. There's no way around it, as we shall see. One must sleep with Lady Death. In wise stories, love is seldom a romantic tryst between two lovers. For instance, some stories from the circumpolar region describe love as a union of two beings whose strength together enables one or both to enter into communication with the soul world and to participate in fate as dance with life and death. The story I am about to relate to you is a hunting story about love. It is set in the frozen north. To understand this story, we have to see that there, in one of the harshest environs and one of the most stressed hunting cultures in the world, love does not mean a flirtation or a pursuit for simple ego pleasures, but a visible bond composed of the psychic sinew of endurance, a union which prevails through bounty and austerity, for the most complicated and most simple of days and nights. The union of two beings is seen as magic in itself, as a relationship through which the powers that be become known to both individuals. But there are requirements for this kind of union. In order to create this enduring love, one invites a third partner to the union. The third partner I call Skeleton Woman. She could also be called Lady Death, and as such, she is another life-death-life figure in one of the many guises. In this form, Lady Death is not a disease, but a deity. In a relationship, she has the role of the oracle who knows when it is time for cycles to begin and end. As such, she is the wildish aspect of relationship, the one of whom men are most terrified, and sometimes women also. And when faith in this transformative has been lost, the natural cycles of increase and attrition, oh my goodness, and whatever, are feared as well. To create enduring love, Skeleton Woman must be admitted to the relationship and be embraced by both lovers. Here, in old Inuit setting, and amplified into original literary story from short 5-line spoken poem given to me by Mary Ukalat is the Skeleton Woman. Here too are the psychic stages for mastery of her embrace. Let us peer at the images which rise from the smoke of the tale. Skeleton Woman. Skeleton Woman. She had done something of which her father disapproved, although no one any longer remembered what it was. But her father had dragged her to the cliffs and thrown her over into the sea. There the fish ate her flesh away and plucked out her eyes. As she lay under the sea, her skeleton turned over and over in the currents. One day a fisherman came fishing. Well, in truth, many came to this bay once. But this fisherman had drifted far from his home place and did not know that the local fishermen stayed away, saying this inlet was haunted. The fisherman's hook drifted down through the water and caught of all places in the bones of Skeleton Woman's ribcage. The fisherman thought, "Oh, now I've really got a big one. Now I really have one." And in his mind he was thinking of how many people this great fish would feed, how long it would last, how long he might be free from the chore of hunting. And as he struggled with this great weight on the end of his hook, the sea was stirred to a thrashing froth, and his kayak bucked and shook, for she was beneath, struggled to disentangle herself. And the more she struggled, the more she tangled into the line. No matter what she did, she was inexorably dragged upward, tugged up by the bones of her own ribs. The hunter had turned to scoop up his net, so he did not see her bald head rise above the waters. He did not see the little coral creatures glinting in the orbs of her skull. He did not see the crustaceans on her old ivory teeth. When he turned back with his net, Her entire body, such as it was, had come to the surface and was hanging from the tip of his kayak by her long front teeth. "Ah!" cried the man, and his heart fell into his knees. His eyes hid in terror on the black back of his head, and his ears blazed bright red. "Ah!" he screamed, and knocked her off the prow with his oar, and began paddling like a demon toward shoreline. And not realizing she was tangled in his line, he was frightened all the more, for she appeared to stand upon her toes while chasing him all the way to shore. No matter which way he zipped his kayak, she stayed right behind him, and her breath rolled over the water in clouds of steam, and her arms failed out as though to snatch him down into the depths. "Ah!" he wailed, and as he ran around, in one leap he was out of his kayak, clutching his fishing stick and running, and the coral-white corpse of skeleton woman still snapped in the fishing line, bumpety-bump behind right after him. Over the rock he ran, and she followed. Over the frozen tundra he ran, and she kept right up. Over the meat laid out to dry he ran, cracking it to pieces as his muclucs bore down. Throughout it she kept right up. In fact, grabbed some of the frozen fish as she was dragged behind. This she began to eat, for she had not gorged in a long, long time. Finally the man reached his snow house and dove right into the tunnel, and on hands and knees scrabbled his way into the interior. Panting and sobbing, he lay there in the dark, his heart a drum, a mighty drum. Safe at last, oh so safe, yes, safe, thanks to the gods. Raven, yes, thanks, Raven, yes, and all bountiful Sedna, safe at last. Imagine when he lit his whale oil lamp, there it lay in a tumble upon the snow floor, one heel over her shoulder, one knee inside her ribcage, one foot over her elbow. He could not say later what it was. Perhaps the firelight softened her features, or the fact that he was a lonely man. But a feeling of some kindness came into his breathing, and slowly he reached out his grimy hands, and using words softly, like a mother to a child, began to untangle her from the fishing line. Ooh, na na na. First he tangled the toes, then the ankles. Ooh, na na na. On and on he worked into the night until dressing her into furs to keep her warm. Skeleton woman's bones were all in order as a human's should be. He felt into his leather cuffs for his flint and used them and some of his hair to light a little bit of more fire. He gazed at her from time to time as he oiled the precious wood of his fishing stick and rewound the gut line. And she in the furs uttered not a word. She did not dare, lest the hunter take her out and throw her down to the rocks and break her bones to pieces entirely. The man became drowsy, slid under his sleeping skins, and soon was dreaming. And sometimes, as humans sleep, a tear escapes from the dreamer's eyes. We never know what sort of dream causes this, but we know it is either a dream of sadness or longing, and that is what happened to this man, a tear escaping from his eyes as he was asleep. The skeleton woman saw the tear glistening in the firelight, and she became suddenly so thirsty. She tinkled and clanked and crawled over the sleeping man and put her mouth to his tear. The single tear was like a river, and she drank and drank and drank until her many years-long thirst was slaked. Then, while lying beside him, she reached inside the sleeping man and took out his heart, the mighty drum. She sat and banged on both sides of it. Ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. As she drummed, she began to sing out, "Flesh, flesh, 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 flesh." And the more she sang, the more her body filled out with flesh. She sang for hair and good eyes and nice fat hands. She sang for the divide between her legs and the breast long enough to wrap for warmth, and breasts long enough to wrap for warmth, and all the things a woman needs. And when she was done, she also sang the sleeping man's clothes off and crept into his bed with him. Skin against skin, she returned to the great drum, his heart to his body, and that is how they awakened, wrapped one around the other, tangled from their night together. In another way now, a good and lasting way. The people who cannot remember how she came to her first ill fortune say she and the fishermen went away and were consistently well fed by the creatures she had known in her life under water. The people say that it is true and that it is all they know. The people say that it is true and that is all they know. I highly recommend that you read this story, read this book, or listen. There is, after Clarissa Pinkola Estes writes the story, there is an analysis of the story, and it just says, I'm just going to read the headlines. It says, Death in the House of Love. The accidental finding of treasure. Untangling the skeleton. The sleep of trust. Giving the tear. Heart as drum and singing up. The dance of body and soul. So I encourage each and every one of us to really dive into the space, whether or not you're in a relationship, whether or not you're separating, whatever kind of place you are in within the sacred union of man and woman. Really go into the depths and explore what it is that is transforming for you on a personal level and for us as a collective. Venus and Jupiter conjunct on the galactic center this Sunday.